Okay, so welcome everyone to today's lesson. We're looking at IELTS writing task 2 lesson, and we're looking at how to write introductions for an advantages outweigh the disadvantages type of essay. When we're writing introductions, all the introductions are made up of 2 parts. Today we're going to be joined by some of my students. I'm going to be asking them questions. They're going to be answering these questions in the chat. I know you can't see the chat box, but I will relay what they're saying. So guys in the chat, can you tell me what are the 2 parts of an introduction? Excellent. Yep, Navina says paraphrase and outline statement. Exactly. So these 2 parts, we've got the paraphrase and an outline statement. Hello, Mona. Welcome to the class. So today's question that we're going to be looking at and writing this introduction for is as follows. Says the world should have only one government rather than a national government for each country. Do the advantages of this outweigh the disadvantages? So first things first, we're going to think about paraphrasing. So when we write paraphrases, a couple of things we need to remember. The paraphrase has to have exactly the same meaning as the question statement. You can't change the meaning at all. This is the most important thing. A good paraphrase changes sentence structure as well as words. For me, whenever I'm writing a paraphrase, that's the thing I want to look at first. How do I change the sentence structure? Because once you change the sentence structure, you'll find the words change themselves. So very, very first thing, rather than thinking about, okay, what words am I going to change? Think about how could I possibly change the sentence structure? And then the most common mistake students make is trying to use synonyms that they don't fully understand. So this comes back to what we always say, don't take risks with vocabulary, keep it simple, keep it accurate. So with that said, how could we think about changing, Mary said, it is argued by some that SVO, or as others say, SVO. So subject, verb, object, subject, verb, object. So definitely, I mean, in the paraphrase, something we could do is we can actually change it around from, sometimes you can change it from being an active voice, which is subject, verb, object, to the passive voice, which is object, verb, subject. So this is something we can have a look at. I don't know if that would work so well with this one. Is there like a halfway point in this sentence? Are there 2 parts of this sentence in a grammatical way? Mary says yes. Excellent. Yeah, Mary's saying the rather than. So the rather than kind of introduces a new point. So how could we change the sentence structure? So we've really got, we can have a look at this, and we've got part 1, part 2. Yeah, so something we can definitely do here to change structure is look at the second part first, and then put this first part second. So just by swapping them around, which would be good. Then we can think of a few words that we can change. So rather than, what could I use rather than? A synonym for rather than. Excellent. Yeah, instead of. So let's do this together. After instead of, what kind of grammatical structure comes after instead of? Yeah, the verb ing or a noun. So basically a noun phrase. So this would be a really nice way of changing sentence structure. So if what gerund are we using here? Or what verb are we turning into a gerund? Have, yeah. We're talking about you have a government. So here we could change the central structure to having. So instead of having, and then I'm not going to do all this for you, but I just want to give you the idea. So we could do that like that. We've changed sentence structure. Because the sentence structure has changed, we're changing this word, and then we can try and find a few synonyms for this. Mary said being. No, we can't say instead of being one government. Well, I guess you could say instead of there being. So that would, I guess, work, Mary. So you could have it like this. So that would be a possible here. Being controlled by, okay, so that's definitely, if we're going to do this controlled by, we're going to have to put the world there. So instead of the, instead of, so we could use that kind of structure, right? If you want to use controlled by. Okay, so anyway, over to you guys. I'm gonna, rather than writing the whole thing for you, I just wanted you to have this idea in your head of trying to change the structure. So now you know how to change the structure. Try it using this different structure with your own words. Mona, be careful. Mona mentioned about using local government rather than national government. Local government normally refers to like an area within a country. So like a regional government. So it would, local and national are not synonyms. What do we do if we can't think of a synonym? Use the original word. Yeah. We could maybe talk here about each country having their own government rather than saying national. So that'd be one way of maybe rewording this. But if you're not sure, repeat. It's much, much better to not take the risks than taking risks with your synonyms. A national authority rather than I think you get away with it. It's a little bit awkward, but it is possible. I would still, personally, Maria, I would just stick to national government if you're going to use that kind of collocation. Okay, let's have a look. Maybe has got a paraphrase here. So instead of having a national government for each country, the world should be controlled by one government. I'm glad Mary's written that. I was hoping you would. Here's another one. Here's another one. Have a look. These three. So this first one, let's see, does it have the same meaning? So instead of having a national government for each country, the world should be controlled by one government. Meaning exactly the same. We've changed sentence structure. We've used words that we understand 100%. So I would say this is an excellent paraphrase. Great job. Well done, Nabila. No problem there. Instead of having one head of state for each nation, there should only here we need the verb to be, there should only be one government worldwide. So one head of state, what does a head of state mean? Can someone tell me? Yeah, head of state is actually the person. So we're not talking about, instead of having one person, we're talking about having one government. So head of state here would not work as a synonym. They're definitely taking a part. This would change the meaning. And this is what I mean by taking a risk with vocabulary here. this becomes an ineffective paraphrase. So. Type. Something you could use instead of government is state. So a lot of people make this mistake and they use state for country. A state is a government, so you could use state. So instead of having one state for each nation, there should only be one government worldwide. The rest of this was really good. I just wanted to point out something that we can paraphrase because it comes up a lot and it's a very easy thing to paraphrase. Should be. What can we change should for? That comes up a lot. Okay, so someone said ought to. So yeah, should and ought to are direct synonyms. You can always use them as synonyms. So the word ought to be controlled. So yeah, you don't have to find synonyms for every single word, but as I said, this is just something that comes up a lot in your question statement. So it's really nice to know this the synonym. Someone says must have. Can I use must have instead of should? No. Why? What is the difference? Yeah, so Nabila saying must have is an obligation. Like there's no choice. But should, what is should? Or ought to? What are they doing? If I said to you, yeah, good, Mary, yeah, it's a suggestion. I said, you should do your homework. I'm giving you a suggestion. I'm giving you an idea, which I think is a good idea. But it's very different to you should do your homework and you have to do your homework. Okay, so must or have to is obligation. Should or ought to are both suggestions. Hence, don't mix up your modal verbs. Okay, so these two were good. Now let's have a look at this. It is argued by some that instead of there being ruled by national states for each nation, whereas others say that the world must have one government. That we've got a little bit confused. The first part I really need to point out. It is argued by some. Is there anything in this question that says it is argued or some people think? No. So if you do not see some people think or it is argued, even though we have got this should, so it doesn't imply it's an opinion, it is a statement, exactly, Vanessa. So this at the moment is a statement. If it's a statement, we can't use it as argued. And I see a lot of students use this to start almost every single paraphrase they ever have. We can't use this to start every paraphrase and we're going to get in trouble. So, yeah, just starting with the instead of. So if you have an expression of instead of, what is the problem with this clause? We can't use conjunctions of contrast after starting up one clause with instead of. So it's basically like having two conjunctions of contrast, and it doesn't make sense. So if you've got two clauses, only one of them is allowed to have a contrasting word at the beginning of it. Okay, so once we fix that, oh, I had a question. Mary, if a question has no some people, then we will not say it is argued. Exactly. You're only likely to use it is argued for discussion essays, because most discussion essays start with some people think this and others think blah, blah, blah. You might find some opinion essays are going to also have this kind of some people think, but only if it clearly states some people's opinion do we use some people think. Or okay. But very, very common mistake. So I hope no one watching this video makes that mistake again. So here, we've got a little bit confused on our sentence structure. So after, instead of, what is the subject in this part? Okay, so national states do the ruling and nations are the object. If we look at this verb structure, being ruled, what kind of verb structure is this? Is it active voice or passive voice? Passive voice, because remember, passive voice is when we have the verb to be plus past participle. So when the passive voice is being used, what goes first? What are we focusing on with the passive voice? The object or the subject? Object. So we put objects at the beginning, not in prepositional phrases. Instead of our object here, each nation. When we say each is always going to be followed by a singular verb. So instead of each nation, now we can have the gerundial expression, that each nation being ruled. And then this is the only time you're going to put your subject in a prepositional phrase. So a lot of my students, I'm always telling them, do not try and put subjects and objects in prepositional phrases. The one time you should be using prepositional phrases with your subject is in the passive voice. So in the passive voice, we use by and then the subject. This is the one time you should be using it. So if you use passive voice, remember you include your subject with by and then the subject. So instead of each nation being ruled by states here are countable. So we'd have an article here. Instead of each nation being ruled by a national state, are people saying, one group of people saying one thing, group of people saying the other? Nope. This is not a discussion essay. So this is dependent, independent. So instead of each nation being ruled by a national state, the world must have. So what are we going to change? Must, because this is obligation. Should, or what was the other alternative I gave you? Ought to, excellent. The world ought to have only one government. Okay, now, do we have the same meaning? Yep, okay. So good job. So just be careful. And again, in this particular instance, obviously, it looked like our writer got confused with it being a discussion essay, whereas we're not doing that now. So don't make that mistake. It's a very, very common mistake. And also, just a few too many risks with sentence structure, trying to be too complicated. Right. I'm just deleting this to make some room for our next one. So let's have a look. I have here for a moment. Another one here from Rie. Okay, so we're looking at this one, aren't we? So it is better for countries to be controlled by one government rather than Okay, it is ruled by national governments. So here we need to be consistent in our structures. So here we've got the passive voice, that if you're going to use rather than, both of your clauses need to be passive. Okay, so we're going to use these comparative structures. So remember, whenever you use a comparative structure, you're comparing X to Y. You want to keep grammatical structures in comparisons very, very similar. So, for example, you compare an adjective with another adjective. You compare a noun with a noun. You're going to compare something in the active voice with something in the active voice. You compare something in the passive voice with something in the passive voice. Don't mix these things up to keep it consistent. So how do we make the second part passive? It's better for countries to be governed by one government rather than ruled. Okay, so then being as a being ruled by national government. Okay. So here, definitely much better. We've got passive, passive. Here we've got to be, but here we've changed it to the gerund. So again, we want to be keeping things consistent. So what would be better than being? So being is definitely better than it was before. Can I change this to be even more consistent? Be, yeah. So it's better for countries to be controlled by one government rather than be ruled by national government. Here we could also, if you want, put this in. This preposition here would be optional. But the point I want you to see is when we make these comparisons, so we've got this comparative word here, you want these comparative structures to be really, really similar. Okay. Okay, now let's just quickly check the meaning is the same. Okay, so what do we think? Does anyone have any questions about this one? Yep, good. I completely agree.
Can I ask you, please?
Oh, we've got a question. Yep. Bona?
Yeah. I want to ask you, I can start with the, it's better to continue. I think this is opinion. It's wrong or what? I show my opinion or what?
Sure. So if looking at this, it is a statement. It is an opinionated statement, but it is a statement. So,
I mean mine, the one I write. It's better
yeah.
to.
It is better. All countries should.
Okay.
I would say this is very similar. I would say just to reduce taking risks. Here, you said it is better for countries. To maybe make it have just a slightly more similar meaning, countries
should be controlled.
I think the way you did it, Mona, is fine. So,
thank you.
Yeah, I think it is better is fine, or you could do countries that ought to be controlled, but both of these would work. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, let's have a look at our next one. So instead of having a national government for each nation, countries ought to have a one world government. I'm really happy with this sentence for a number of reasons. What do we think? Does it have the same meaning? Vina says yes. Is it nice and simple? No risks taken? So well done, because I know Rie likes to get a little bit complicated at times. This is really, really clear. There were no grammar mistakes. It's excellent. So great job, Rie. Very nice to see. You're writing incredibly good paraphrases here. Great job. So Vanessa says, I don't know how to start the paraphrase, but with a change in sentence structure, it made it easier. Yeah, changing sentence structure is going to help you change your wording a little bit. Because if you just get in the mindset, and this is what, as I said, I would say 80% of students I watch trying to paraphrase, they just look at this and go, okay, what is a synonym for world? What is a synonym for should? What is a synonym for one government? What is a synonym for rather? And they just go synonym, 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 synonym. Maybe if they've got really good vocabulary, they get away with that. If they don't have great vocabulary and they're making vocabulary mistakes, then it all falls apart. Because quite often the collocations work for what's provided in the question statement. But if you're just trying to find synonyms for everything, you start changing the collocations and the collocations become unnatural. So this is where generally you get into trouble of just looking for synonyms. So if you can get in, again, it's not always going to be possible. You can't always change the sentence structure, but if you can, see if you can like split things up into two parts. A lot of the question statements you see, or the sentences you see, they can be broken into two parts. Again, this is coming down to your knowledge of grammar. Very early on, you're being tested. Do you understand about complex sentences? Because if you understand complex sentences, you can change your clauses around. So make sure you understand complex sentences, compound sentences, how they work, and the reason for them. But by doing this way, as I said, most people have done this really, really well. So great job. Was there anyone else who had paraphrases that I needed to look at? I think I've got everyone, but I'm not sure. Nope. Okay. So we will move on. We did this last lesson and we generated some ideas. So the second part of the introduction needs to be our outline statement. So our outline statement is where we literally outline the ideas we're talking about. So that means your outline statement is pretty much an index. Okay, you're indicating what you're going to be talking about throughout. It's very important that in the planning stages, you've already done this. We need to know what is a strong idea, what is a weak idea. Which one goes first? When we're writing body paragraphs. Yeah, the weak idea. So you always talk about weak ideas first, strong ideas second. Because it makes a much stronger argument. If you're talking about two arguments, you want the strong argument at the end because it leaves a good taste in the mouth. That's the final argument the reader listens to, and therefore that should be the argument that you agree with, that you think is strong. So we said the advantages of the one world government were there's less immigration problems, and the disadvantages are it's difficult for one government to rule. And we said, for us, there were more disadvantages. This is stronger than this. So on to our outline statement. As I said before, outline statement is where you're going to outline the main ideas that you're going to talk about in your essay. If you've got two ideas, you need to outline two. You might have a multiple idea question. There might be 4 ideas. All of them need to be in your outline statement. Your outline statement is also sometimes called a thesis statement. Think of it as an index. Right? This is telling the reader what they're going to read. So your ideas need to be in the same order that you're going to give them in your essay. So if in the paragraphs, the weak idea comes first, in the outline statement, the weak idea comes first. Having a clear outline statement is super essential for coherence cohesion. Okay, so you want your ideas in your introduction and your outline statement, then you have the main body where you talk about your ideas, and then you can use your conclusion to basically, your conclusion is just a paraphrase of your outline statement. So if you get your outline statement right, you should have your conclusion right as well. So what you're doing here is basically going to be exactly the same as what your conclusion is. Here is a tip that I would really recommend for most people. Make sure that the ideas in your outline statements are written in clauses, not as noun phrases. I see so many students just go, okay, my idea is it's just like one word. You're trying to give an idea, or let's go back to what a clause is. A clause is a complete idea. So if you're outlining your ideas, it makes sense that you're outlining in clauses rather than just writing one word. It's always going to read better if you outline ideas in clauses. Okay, so with that said, I'm going to throw this over to my students. What do you think we could do here? Idea 1 is less immigration. Idea 2 is difficult for governments to rule. And remember, this question is, do the advantages outweigh the disadvantages? So we're going to need to state that directly. So we are saying the disadvantages outweigh the advantages. That this expression needs to be in there at some point. So a structure that we could use for this almost every single time is automatic. This type of essay, you could use this structure, I think, absolutely every single time. So although, and what's going to come in here, the weak idea, the strong idea. This is a structure that could be copied over and over again. Okay, let's have a look at these ones that we have here. I don't know why the spacing is so strange here. So although it is less immigration issues, I think that the advantages outweigh the disadvantages because it is difficult to govern. So it's very, very confusing here. So it is less immigration. What is less immigration? There will be a better expression here. And issues and isn't going to work because is singular and issues are plural. So it will be better than it is. So Mona, yeah, so there are. So if we're going to use something like this, although there are less immigration issues, definitely we could have that having one government. But let's just make this make grammatical sense and we'll go into this in a bit more detail. Although there are less immigration issues, I think the advantage that way, this part is good because it is difficult to govern. Again, I have no idea what we're talking about here with it. What does it refer to? What do they refer to? What is difficult to govern? I want to know what is being difficult. What is difficult? What gets governed? Who can tell me? I want a noun. What does it refer to? What's difficult to govern? That's a clause. What thing gets governed? A government governs a... Are we talking about the world? There we go. Got there eventually. Nations. Okay, countries. So we are saying that it's difficult to rule individual countries. But at the moment, this is incredibly vague. Although there are less immigration issues. For what? So let's have a condition. When? What is the condition? There's less immigration when there is. What situation creates less immigration issues? National governments or one world government? One, okay. So although there are less immigration issues when there is a one world government, I think the advantages outweigh the disadvantages, because nations are difficult to govern. So that's how this makes more sense. I think the advantages outweighs disadvantages because nations are difficult to govern if there is only one government. So this is meaning that there is only one government now. So this is a hypothetical situation. So we're not going to say are difficult. Will be possible. What's more natural for, very good. Yeah, when we're talking about hypothetical situations, would, because nations would be difficult to govern if there was. This is second conditional, so we need the past simple. Okay. So what can we take away from this outline statement? What were the problems in the beginning? Yeah, Mary says vague. We need to be much more specific. Okay, so basically we're not. This writer is trying to not put enough information in. You need to put all the information in at the beginning. Because remember, we've just had a paraphrase, that's it. This is where you're introducing everything. Remember, you're writing an introduction, you have to introduce what we're talking about. So we're trying to be as specific as possible. So let's have a look at our next one. So although being globally ruled by one government, can lead to less immigration problems. I believe that drawbacks outnumber benefits because it is difficult for one government to rule the whole world. Okay. I like this part. I don't like starting with these gerundial phrases. How can we make this just seem like a very simple clause? So subject, what is our subject? Our verb is rule. Who is doing the ruling? Government, okay. So although one government, then we have our verb. So subject, verb, or ruling. One government ruling the world can lead to less immigration problems. Okay, so even if you've got a gerundial phrase, so I realize this is actually a noun phrase, but the same concepts arise. You want the subject, the verb, which has been turned into a gerund, and the object. So it is a noun phrase, but it is still following this English structure of subject, verb, object. And then this becomes another subject, verb, object. So we've got subject, verb, object within subject, verb, object. Mary says, one government is the adjective to noun ruling. Yes, I guess you could look at it like that. The government is modifying ruling the world, but it's saying who is ruling the world. So yeah, if you want to look at it like that, Mary, that would be correct. Okay, but when we have these ideas, as I said, just think who is doing something, what is it doing, what is it doing it to? Trying to have that subject, verb, object is just the way English-speaking people think. It's where the words go in their mind. So I know we've got some Spanish-speaking people here. Oh yeah, that all changes around. And I know when I try to learn Spanish, like it's really confusing because your brain is wired to think of objects in different orders. But this is the way that an English-speaking person's brain is wired. They think, okay, who does something? What are they doing? To what? Okay, and we want to try and make all of our structures as much as possible like this. Okay, so I'm going to check one more time. Although one government ruling the world can lead to less immigration problems, good. I believe that drawbacks outnumber the benefits because it's difficult for one government to rule the whole world. Excellent. Okay. Have a look at some new ideas. So I'm just going to delete these so we can have some space. So although it is advantageous for one government to rule the world because it helps in less immigration problems, but I is always capitalized in English. I believe the advantages outweigh the disadvantages because it is difficult for one government to rule the world. Okay. Nice attempt here, a little bit of grammar here. So although it is advantageous for one government to rule the world because it helps in less. Helps in less isn't a structure we can really use. What can we use here? One word. So I want one verb which is going to replace helps in less. Verb. Less is not a verb. So what verb talks about making something less? So avoid is more to stop. Decrease, good. Is there another verb I can use instead of decrease? So decrease is absolutely fine. Nothing wrong here. Because it decreases immigration problems. Yeah, reduce. Reduce is a verb that people often have problems with. Why can I use reduce here? When do we use reduce? When we have, so we're using reduce when we have a subject. So something is reducing immigration problems. So often in academic task 1, you'll see students use reduce when they mean decrease, because decrease, you don't need a subject. You can just say the number decreased. We have no idea what made the number decrease, it just decreased. But here, having a one world government, this is our subject. The subject reduces object. So in this instance, our subject will affect this by making the number decrease, and we can use the verb reduce. If that confuses you, just use decrease, and you can use it all the time. Yeah, reduce or decrease is fine, Mary. So both will be fine, but there are times you cannot use reduce. Decrease you can always use. So if you're ever confused, just use decrease all the time. But reduce, just remember you need a subject. But here we have a subject, so we can use reduce. Okay, apart from that, so although it is advantageous for one government to rule the world because it reduces immigration problems, I believe the advantages outweigh the disadvantages because it is difficult for one government to rule the whole world. Excellent. Apart from that, very, very clear. Yeah. It reduces subject, verb. So this needs to be S. Yeah. Okay, let's have a look at our next one. Although a single government can mitigate immigration issues, I believe drawbacks outweigh the benefits because implementing the system would not be simple for them. Thus, it is unlikely to be realistic. Okay, language is excellent. What is our problem? This realistic part, yeah, doesn't seem like it has anything to do with the question. It seems like a completely new part. So, although a single government can mitigate immigration issues, brilliant start. I believe drawbacks outweigh the benefits because implementing the system would not be simple. For them, who is implementing it? Okay, so we could say a single government. Them here is a little bit unclear. What is the other thing we can do? Because this is passive voice. I can just omit the subject completely. So it would not be simple. So this is probably the most, this is the way a native speaker would indicate this. So rather than putting these prepositional phrases at the end, the people doing the implementing are of zero importance in this sentence, which is why we're using the passive voice. So simply no need for the subject to be included here. Okay. The benefits of implementing this would not be simple. Yeah. Okay. So apart from that, again, really good. These sentences are much clearer than what you were doing before. Really nice use of the word mitigate here. I think for me, this is really high level language that you're using. You're using it very accurately, so great job. So once again, Rhea has been the star of our introductions today. Yeah, it was worth her waking up. Anyone watching, poor Rhea has woken up at 4 o'clock in the morning to attend this lesson. Well done. Must have some very good coffee in Japan. Okay, have we got any other sentences that I haven't looked at yet? I feel there are more. Oh, bonus, okay. Oh, this is interesting. I'm going to get rid of this. So Mona was saying, what about this? This essay disagrees that the benefits of being ruled by one government outweighs drawbacks. Because countries face a lot of difficulties in governing by their own. Okay, just on not worrying about vocabulary or grammar, what's our number one biggest mistake here? I said not worrying about vocabulary or grammar. What does an outline statement have to do? Oh, Vanessa says ideas. Okay, so that's what I'm trying to think about, ideas. What's wrong with the ideas here? How many ideas do I have? One. So this is very, very classic. We've got a student just focusing on one idea. Now, is this an opinion essay? Is this does this essay agree or disagree? Is there anywhere in the question that says, do you agree or disagree? Nope. Okay. So if there's nowhere in the question asking you, do you agree or disagree? We're not going to write like this. Okay. Keep it simple. You've got a structure here. You have a structure here that you know works 100% of the time. If a teacher tells you something works 100% of the time, is it a good idea to try something else just to be different? No. I can't get this through to people. If someone tells you to do something and it works, follow this. Okay, this structure works. Sure, there are other ways to write. We don't need to find the other ways. We found a very simple way of doing this, so we're going to keep it simple. Because by trying to mix everything around, we start missing the obvious elements. If you follow this structure, how many ideas will you always have by following this structure? 2. You can't make a mistake with this structure. Although weak idea, blah, 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 because strong idea. And very clearly talking about which one outweighs the other. Okay. So this is not me being nasty to you, but I want to get this through. You've got someone that says, okay, this works. You don't need to find something else. You're just making your life too difficult. Find the structures, learn the structures, follow them. If you want to get creative, do it once you get to university or whatever you're taking your IELTS for. Pass the test first. And by following this structure, you will pass the test. Okay, so let's reword here. So although being ruled by one government, well, being ruled by one government. So what was the idea? The weak idea is there's less immigration. So although the world being ruled by one government, Jesus, immigration. I believe the drawbacks outweigh the benefits because, no comma after, because countries would face a lot of difficulty in governing Okay. So we've brought it back to the original structure, and now we have exactly what we want. We have weak idea. We have our opinion, very, very clear. We have strong idea, very, very clear. We even know that the grammatical structures we're following, clause, so here, weak clause, strong clause. We don't need to take risks with our grammar at all. We know exactly what we're doing. We're going subject, verb, object in both of these structures. Okay, and if you do that, let me just highlight them here. So we go. Point 1. Some people like colors. We've got weak idea. Needs to be in that color too. Light blue. Yeah. So these are our colors that we want. 1 part, 2 part, 3 parts, 4 parts. 1 part. 2 parts. Oh, and we should always have a comma here. 3 parts. And 4 parts. Okay. So if you can write like this type, advantages outweigh the disadvantages, this structure will always be good for your outline statement. You don't have to worry. You know you've included everything that you need as long as you've got relevant ideas which came from your planning section. Okay. Does anyone else have any outline statements for me to look at, or are we done? Okay. You're welcome, Lena. And as I said, I don't take that as I'm trying to have a go at you, but I want to instill in you, if someone gives you a way that works, follow it. Okay. Because it's much easier to learn one way than learn 5 ways. You've got enough things to worry about when you're studying IELTS than trying to learn 5 things instead of 1 thing. So make your life as easy as possible and keep it simple. Okay. Right, so great. I think we have covered everything there. If anyone who's watching this has any questions, please leave them in the comments or join our Facebook group. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share this video. Thank you very much to all of our students who were providing lots of sample sentences for us, and good luck in all of your studies.